Well, hello there, everyone. Talk about for September 11th right here. In case if anybody were to ask me that you'll remember about where you were on that day of September 11th, and I'm like, yeah, yes I do. I'm like, I was in school during a time that I would have gotten into class right around 7:30 a.m. something like that. Around 6:45, 7:30 a.m. Is whenever I went to one of my classes and. Yeah, I was a sophomore during the time in high school, but I can remember that to where that one of my first classes was a language arts class, so I can remember that whenever I went into my class that we were talking, I think about the Olympics or something like that. Yeah, that around September, that around the fall is usually whenever that the Winter Olympics were going to be going on. If anybody can remember about the Winter Olympics that we were talking about the Winter Olympics and then other things based on the English class activities, and I can remember that it was a language arts class, and then the other class was consumer economics. It was a cooking class, and I can remember that apparently the principal had announced on the news that our country's under attack. And so you're likely thinking is that, yeah, I use InDesign to put this example right here together of talk about this was right here was supposed to be like a newsletter right here. But talking about do you remember where you were on September 11th? I was in the English class, taking a test actually. So you're likely thinking is that you heard that before about exactly what was President Bush doing on that day of September 11th, and a lot of questions were going by as to why was he allowed to sit there during the time of the attacks. He was visiting those kids at the school in Florida, and that the look on his eyes as to where a lot of people probably say that like that know about what you had to think about that about the president that the president, our commander in chief of the country on that day of September 11th, that people were calling him like what you call this puppet type person, to where he don't have the basic training to be the commander in chief of our country. That he's basically like a puppet until he gets orders from the speaker or maybe from the representative or somebody like that, and then he'll be able to follow those orders about, well, what do you want me to do about it? So it seems like, yeah, exactly, that kind of like in case if anybody wanted to read it, that sounds a little bit more like a vice president. Vice president, I guess that they're basically in charge of, taking care of something based on being commander-in-chief. Like, yeah, in case of that whenever the president is away, then they're going to respond to any calls that matter or any situations like that. But you have right here is like, for example, right here, like I worked on what we talk about for President Bush right here. But I could tell anybody here that if president, if anybody say, yeah, if you were scheduled that morning to take a test, like with me though, that if I was scheduled to take a test, if I was going to be in the classroom maybe for about an hour or two, and September 11th just came up, it was not scheduled, and according to what the news report says, is to where like September 11th. That was planned, I guess, by the Al Qaeda's, the terrorists of, say, of Afghanistan's or Al Qaeda's, and so I guess they're still even though if it was 16, 17 years ago, they're still investigating about, exactly about who planned the attacks and why did it happen, all that, but really that. If you're going to be tested on something, it sounds like to me that, exactly that. The question could go by as to where if you're in the middle of a test, then, what's the emergency? I guess was going to be going by as to where that's the next question, is what's the emergency? At the same time, like I mentioned everybody here before, at the same time, I can remember that I was in a spelling test and learning, what exactly do these pronouns mean, and then so far as the sentence fragments. So I had to have a lot of practice with my writing skills, and at the same time, it seems like this attack, on our country was going on at the same time, and so you're likely thinking as to where, that if you're going to be in the middle of a test, then you're being distracted. you were interrupted by somebody telling you that that's something that you gotta take care of. It's an urgent matter. And so you're likely thinking as to where that if you're going to be in the middle of a test, then you're also worried too that do you have to stop what you're doing just to take care of another matter, even though if it was not on your schedule? So you're likely worried too that whenever and I know that if anybody were to say that, yeah, well, maybe there's only so much you can do because that's up there in New York City, or maybe if you're down in Texas, or maybe in Hawaii, or maybe Washington State, or maybe Maine, or maybe if you're living in Michigan, then yeah, exactly, that something that you had to take care of, even if you were on that day of September 11th. That would have been about election time, or maybe if you were working at a daycare center during the time and the things that you had to take care of, maybe if you were, maybe if you were taking care of an important matter or something like that. But still, that I mainly want to talk about a test though. If you're in the middle of a test, then you might get distracted by something that's going on, and so that's I can remember this. I think I told everybody here that that this right here will be some examples right here of my handwriting back in the day from whenever I was in a language arts class, and if I can remember right, this was about 7 days before September 11th. If we could see this right here, using my Photoshop work, I put this together right here. Scanned it and upload it into on my computer, so that way show everybody here. But you see right here is police and danger and first aid. So a lot of the words that they had me working on during the time whenever I was in language arts class, because I remember that my English class was the first class that I was going, whenever I went into school, because I guess the first plane hit struck, I guess if it was the north, it may have been the South Tower, whenever the first plane struck the building of the South Tower was. It might have been the North Tower. If I can remember right, the article said the South Tower or something. But whenever the first plane hit, that it was like, yeah, exactly. That would have been about 8:30 a.m. something like that. I was already in another class, but still, that being tested on something. Looking at some of these test results, though, you're likely thinking as to where that most of all of us. We know how to spell a few of these words, but do we really think that September 11th, do we even know that you'll be prepared for this September 11th? And, exactly, whenever you're tested on something, it seems like there's something a lot more about it than, that there's going to be, a hijacking going on, or there's a bomb threat, or something about, to where that, there's a robbery going on downtown, and this is an urgent matter. How many of us are going to say that, were you even tested on all that stuff? The stuff that you had access to at the time, the stuff that you were trained to do during the time? You weren't too, that there's all kinds of questions, but that this right here actually shows right here is my actual writing about warning, poison, police, danger, and first aid. And some of these test words right here look a little bit like paramedic, like if I was learning and studying during the time to be a paramedic, or a firefighter, but still, that whenever you're tested on something, this seems like, exactly, 5th grade work, it seems like maybe less important really to know exactly about, if it means the same, if it's a pronoun or if it's an action verb. But if I can remember right, one of these notes that I wrote down on that spelling test was nearly 7 days before September 11th. So you're likely thinking as to where that whenever you're going to be tested on something, then at the time, it seems like you just never know what could happen. But at the same time, it seems like that, we also worry too is to worry about the president. The president of the United States of America was in was in his classroom during the time, the classroom that he was visiting. But a lot of people were warned to her that how come that he didn't take action? He took action maybe within 30 minutes or so after the attacks. But he didn't take no action right away, so he had that look on his face like, exactly, well, what's in it for me? or I'm busy right now, what do you want? And I know that maybe not everybody had cell phones during a time like they do with all this mobile phone stuff, but all these mobile phone accessories. But I tell you one thing, though, that exactly, if you're going to be president, then somebody like me, you who has a disability, with maybe one or two, that is there something that maybe you could have done a little bit more than maybe what was originally planned? So you're likely to say, so if you're going to be making visits, though, that what all could you have done more that would have been more relevant, to the American people? Whenever you're going to be commander in chief of the country, it just seems like that exactly that that you have to respond. Certain things about the job that maybe that do come up all of a sudden. But I mean, you may have heard that before, to where we learn by our own mistakes. But I'm just providing feedback to everybody here. But you have right here that this writing, repeated right here, this right here basically says as to where were you on September 11th? I was in an English course taking a spelling test. So it's like, taking a spelling test, yeah. So you're like we weren't, to where do we have to test our president of the United States? Do we have to test him? Give him a quiz. How do you use nuclear weapons? How should we work our national security? How should we manage our tax cuts and our tax codes? How should we form our jobs better? So you're likely worried to worry about test scores. And I even heard, though, that I guess if President Bush was a C student, whenever he was in school. But I tell you one thing, though, that this right here would be example right here of a chalkboard right here. But you're likely thinking as to where that after President Bush was elected, or if it was the 43rd president, I guess it was the 43rd president of the United States, that you're likely thinking, wonder as to where that people will wonder to where that on that day of September 11th, he had that look on his face, like, exactly, I'm in the middle of a test. What do you want? Well, I'm busy right now. I'm on vacation. You bother the secretary. So I guess the look that President Bush had on his face was more likely that he was on vacation. It was not his responsibility. And that about how many of us are granted a vacation time during a certain time of the year. But you're also thinking too that whenever you're president, you just, even if you're on vacation, you just can't think about I'm on the beach, enjoying my dessert or something like that. If you got situations like if America is under, if your country's under attack, just think about for the people of our country, the leader of our country, our country, though, that the things that maybe the president should have done or could have done on that day of September 11th. But I just want to make sure, tell everybody here about my feedback about that. Whenever I first got the news, though, that one or two that exactly people are talking about the president. That look that the president had on his face whenever he heard about planes crashing. About America was under attack. But you see right here is this work right here of talking about that the anniversary of September 11th right here. So you're likely thinking is that if this were here, right here was supposed to be like an article, and let's just say they say that had a multiple choice question between A, B, and C about which one looks like the right answer, about what do you think you should do? But still though any sorts of training about how to be a commander in chief, how to be a manager, how to be president, and I guess if you want to describe that to where that's how George W. Bush was, that George Bush, that maybe that seemed like that maybe people were thinking that he did not have the training that he needed just to take handle situations to where if America's under attack, what should he have done? And so it's like what attack basically means is that's something that comes up all of a sudden. It was not planned. It was an urgent situation. And So whenever I look at these right here, that yeah, warning though, warning and poison and police in danger. At the time, stuff like this can come up all of a sudden. I can tell anybody here that even though if you were supposed to be scheduled to take a vacation at some point, that matters like that could come up, and you're likely thinking too that it may not even be my job to pass the message off, or if it's an important matter. But I guess if you are in the middle of a test, then sometimes it seems like that you have to think about as to where what's the most important topic compared to the least important topic, and is for what's on the urgent agenda. So you're likely thinking that we're looking at September 11th right here, talking about true enemies, and I say it goes by enemies, but on that day of September 11th, and I know a lot of trivia questions are going to maybe ask anybody as to where do you remember where you were on that day of September 11th right here, and some of us may say, yeah, I was in the middle of a test, I was taking a driving test, or I was in a piloting class. I was in the Air Force or something like that. So it seems like, that almost every year you're going to hear about September 11th, but almost everybody's going to have about the similar responses, and for what they were doing during the time. And it could have been also a job transfer. It could have also been something else that is related to getting a promotion on a job or something, or maybe expecting the first child or something. Maybe somebody was getting married, but still, I know it. People were turning their TV on just to expect the weather. They don't expect to see a building on fire. But you're likely thinking too that the weather, though, that if you're going to be tested on the weather, then exactly, that you turn the TV on to watch one of your favorite programs, or to watch the weather. You'll see what the weather's doing. But instead, that people are turning their TV on and looking at a plane crashing into the building, and then the building's on fire. And what sorts of tests would that be necessarily? So, the amount of times it takes just to spell first aid right, just to spell danger right, just to spell police right, and just to spell warning, and then poison right. I wrote it 3 times because during that time that was part of the language at class, is to where they ask you to write it 3 times, 3 or 4 times. If you had a lot going on, write it down a couple times on a piece of paper if you got it right, or if you got it wrong. But I tell you one thing though, everybody, that whenever you're tested on something, it seems like to where stuff that you just don't think about, and whenever urgent matters do come up, it just seems like to where that is a test really a fail, or if it's a pass, is to where that how everything was handled. So like I say, is to where that exactly, that could the spelling test could have maybe included the words such as pocket case, or maybe bank account, or something like that, or credit card. I'm sure most of us nowadays know how to spell credit card, capital 1, and credit card, and bank balance. Anything about financial management that you're able to spell bank just fine. But these words right here are what I was practicing with, but I kept thinking too that am I sure, because I did not put the date on all of the classwork that I did from over the years, from back in the day. But I tell you one thing though, that I recall that that one of these papers was written 7 days before September 11th, and I remember going through some of the spelling test results, and that seems very odd that you're going to be practicing spelling tests, and this sorts of stuff. This sorts of stuff is what I maybe should have learned a long time ago. But from the 5th grade, that maybe I should have learned this stuff a long time ago. But the things that maybe our country should have been prepared to do and taken respect, I'm like, the things that maybe we could have done a long time ago too, was as to where that knowing about if there was going to be source of danger, such as training our employees, training the airport security and other situations about there's an urgent situation going on, then what should you do? So I know that during that time of September 11th, a lot of people are going to maybe ask me as to where, no, I was not in a meeting during the time. I was in the classroom. I was in the classroom during the time. But I tell you one thing, if I would have been in the middle of a test, and in case if anybody were to say that, if you were supposed to take a test, you were in the middle of a math test, on that day of September 11th, and would they have liked it to where that you had to stop what you were doing just to take care of what was going on? So a lot of times, though, that it seems like if anybody say that, during the time of President Bush's, first year of his term, whenever he was in office, that it seems like that he had to have a lot of training, just know about what he had to do. Just know, okay, if you're going to be our president, the commander-in-chief, the leader of our country, and talk about for national security, but exactly that he had to have specific training just to know about what he had to do, for during his presidency, and a lot of the stuff right here, the president may even say that a lot of that stuff right there, including the puzzles and finger paintings or whichever, may seem like stuff just for kids or whichever. I already know that stuff, or I don't have to do it. But still, though, that you wonder too that whose job really is it just to make sure that everything is all right, everything's all safe, our national security is in good hands. So you're likely thinking is that, during the time of September 11th, if you're going to be in the middle of a test or something, then it's like, yeah, exactly. That September 11th, that's something that seems like, say that, yeah, it was planned, say by the Al-Qaedas, but I tell you one thing, though, that if you're going to be in the middle of a test, though, then it seems like to where that, exactly, that whenever you get distracted, that's very aggravating to anybody. The planes were distracted too. If anybody say whenever a plane is hijacked, that basically somebody else has control or something's wrong, it's hard for you to concentrate. You're in a cooking class. It's hard for you to concentrate, just to do your job right. Instead, exactly. Well, that there's an urgent matter. That there has been somebody's, exactly. The things that they had now, nowadays, back in those days, it's like, maybe not everybody had a Facebook or Twitter account, but I tell you one thing, though, that we all have responsibilities. We all have responsibilities, but if we're talking about if you're in a test, though, like with me, though, that, like I say, is to where if you see something wrong, really, what should you do? But at least maybe keep an eye on, mention it, but still, that, and I know that ever since the Columbine high school shootings, too, and other school shootings that were going on in other states, too, but I tell you one thing, though, that if anybody say that, your comments about what you think about that President Bush, that, about how that day of September 11th was handled. And so, I can think as to where, yeah, he was a puppet. He, that look on his face whenever he heard about that the first plane hitting the towers, and he's like, say, well, it's probably pilot error, it's probably an accident. But still, and then they heard about, there was another plane that struck, I guess if it was the North Tower, America was under attack. So you're likely thinking as to where that, Mr. President, hey, listen, okay, I'm in a test right now where I'm on vacation. And I guess if we want to call us to where, is that what the president was saying? He's on vacation. It's not my responsibility right now. I'm not even at the White House. And I don't know, really, that couldn't we maybe even say that if you are not at the White House during a time, that's not your responsibility to take care of that urgent matter. But it's like, that's the vice president's responsibility, or, a secretary, you say a speaker of the House, like anybody, probably one or two, that whose responsibility is it that whenever the president is away on a visit trip, if America is under attack, and but still, during the spelling test, if anybody will wonder to her that how come that like other words that could have been added to the spelling test over time too. Maybe pocket watch or something like that, or maybe notepad, or it could also maybe be like band-aid. I'm like, how many of us have been tested about how to spell band-aid? Or exactly that. Well, what should you do? What should you do that if you see something wrong? I'm like, yeah, the seatbelts were not fastened correctly, or is there something about the airplane, the combustion, the air pressure is too low or something. So I say, how many of us know how to spell air pressure? How many of us are going to think as to where you're going to be tested about what does this word mean right here? So there's all kinds of things that you're probably wondering about exactly about September 11th. But I tell you one thing, though, that if you're going to be tested on something, and let's just say if you were distracted by something about September 11th, and then knowing about what you had to do, but in case if anybody were to say that, was President Bush going back to school during the time? He was in the classroom during the time of September 11th, and did he have to be trained, especially about how to handle stuff like that, so far as terrorist attack goes? And so far as with the terrorist attack, you're one or two that, presidents, though, whenever they take office, that do they have to be specifically trained of how to be a commander-in-chief, or if it's all about us to where that, I'm going back to the fourth grade. I'm going to go ahead and see the kids and, give them a special treat and say that it's not my responsibility right now to take care of that. But the way I think about it too, that, if you're going to be tested on something, and they say about what articles that you want to read about, but still, I just want to mainly point this out right here, everybody, about poison New York City. So yeah, that during that time of September 11th, it was at the 4 days before September 11th. I can remember that it was an English activity that I was in, as well as I was in job seeking class during the time. So a lot of things that I was doing in school were related to filling out job applications and knowing how to spell certain words, and so I was doing quite a bit of school stuff during the time. But you're also one or two that I guess a lot of people probably say that what about the president, though? Do you think that the president should have been in school? Like that he had to go back to school just to know about how to prevent another attack, or to know about what he had to do on that day of September 11th? That is to where that, Mr. President, don't just sit there, okay? You need to get back to the airplane. So yeah, that. So you're likely thinking too that this right here, that don't really look like President Bush right there. But if anybody will want to where that, how do we describe an example of a puppet right here? But this puppet right here is basically that if you hear any words about a terrorist attack or something like that, America is under attack. A plane had struck one of the buildings in New York City, Mr. President. I'm in the middle of a test. Well, what you need? What do you want? So yeah, that. So in case if anybody wanted to where that, if you're going to be in a meeting, and then there's a terrorist attack going on, or an urgent matter that's going on at the time, you're one or two that if you could test the president on anything, then what do you think that you would test him on? Oh, maybe national security. And it could also be as to where that what's considered a pronoun, what's considered a verb, and then what is considered a subject. Conclusion, introduction, and conclusion. I say, oh, okay, well, what's in it for me? But the way I think about it too, that if you're going to be in the middle of a test or training, that sometimes it seems like that you can maybe ask yourself that question too, as to where that, are you basically trained and knowing about what you have to do about matters like that come up? And one of those is I say that, is that urgent matter going to come before the test or after you pass the test? But still, though, that talk about for President Bush right here, and this was right here was supposed to be like a newspaper article right here, for A, B, or C. But still, that in case anybody say that what does C basically mean? It's like, exactly that. Are you supposed to hide example, for option A, B, or C. C means that you're supposed to hide. B means that you're supposed to report back to the to the Air Force, Air Force Base or something like that. A would also be, just focus on the kids. But still, that really, that if anybody say that, you're in the middle of handing out cookies to the children, but then there's going to be a terrorist attack going on, and so you're likely thinking too that number of things that you'll be tested on also. But that's something to think about. Talk about with tests though, that whenever you're going to be tested on something, it seems like no matter if you're still in school or maybe working a job or something like that, it's like exactly if you were scheduled to take a test and want to know about exactly any interruptions or whatever, but take care of the most important reasons. As I talk about, understand about the test of, talk about for September 11th, the 16th anniversary. But other than that, thanks for watching everyone, and have a great day.